Does your family watch the show and think, wait a minute, I never did that. You know, I never stole a blender. I just made that up. That's not a plot point. But I know that, you know what I mean? I know that if I did a show called Conan, I hired actors to play my parents and my all my brothers and sisters, I would be constantly getting calls like, what the fuck was that? You know, you had me steal a scrunchie. You know, you know what I mean?
No, totally. I kind of like really, you know, I there was this big period of my life where my parents weren't seeing any of the comedy I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I did stand up probably. I wasn't putting anything online. I wasn't doing anything. I just kind of did it silently for you know, almost 10 years, just trying to get it, you know, where I wanted it to be. And then, you know, when the show was coming out and my stand up was coming out, I kind of told my parents, I was like, look, this is really, I'm taking from everyone in the community, you know, and there's a writer's room. It's not just me, you know, and I think I worked hard to create enough likeness, but also enough distance between all the individual family members. So I think my parents were kind of like, okay, he's doing something different. And they're also really big fans of television. Like my parents watch everything, you know, they like would know specific bits of yours. Like my dad loves comedy. He'll watch Late Night. Mm-hmm. He watches everything on HBO. So he I think at first maybe had a little bit of this, like, why are you doing this? And we had a couple of those conversations. And then very quickly, like the TV fan in him kind of clicked on. And then, you know, he'll watch the seasons, and now we're at the third season and he's like, oh yeah, you really nailed the tone. You know, and I'm like, oh, cool. I'm like talking about tone with my dad. That's like really cool, you know? So that's something.
My father has never said to me, you really nailed the tone. Dad,
that's what every son hopes to hear.
I'm coming home. I'm in the East Coast. Just try to muster a you really nailed the tone. And then something about ragamuffins.
That's what every Hollywood son would love to hear from his father, you know.
You nailed the tone.
Don't even get me started on the lighting. You know, just really, that's where it gets emotional.
Your show went to the Middle East, and I'm really fascinated by this because tell me exactly where you shot.
Season 1 we shot in Egypt, and then season 3 we shot in Egypt and we shot in Jerusalem.
Right.
Yeah, and so we took my character, you know, from the first season we've kind of seen him. He again, he doesn't really have a passion. He gets into his uncle's family business.
Yes.
And he's selling jewelry in the Diamond District,
right,
which was based on a couple of my buddies that I grew up with who were like the 3 Lebanese dudes in the district, and everyone else is mainly Jewish, and I would walk in and just the banter would be hilarious. I mean, everyone's just going at everybody, and it's the same guys. Everyone's going back and forth, like saying really, really crude shit, and then like
and also
hugging and making deals and like the whole thing.
What's crazy too is your uncle character is so anti-Semitic.
Yes.
You know, and obviously to have an anti-Semitic character, but also at times, and this sounds insane, but the stuff he's saying is absolutely crazy, but almost cartoonishly crazy. And you're just saying, nope, that's okay. No, that's not true. But you also give him some dimension so that there are times where I almost feel for him. Do you know what I mean? Or where I think, okay, I see there's a human being in there, which I think is next to impossible to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, we wanted to kind of show him in this position where we have the Ramy character, and so much of his thing is like, I'm looking at things in my family, I'm looking at things in my tradition, I'm looking at all these things, and I'm figuring out which things do I want to move forward with? You know, what things do I want to be part of my life? So on one hand, there's the spiritual element of it where I think he's really grasping towards a lot of these great things that he wants. But then there's a couple of cultural things and family things that he's like, you know, this, you know, there's certain level of strictness that's wild. And then there is this like uncle who walks around with his anti-Semitism. Right. And just watching Ramy kind of bat that away and what that struggle is really exciting, and because I think it's so real. And so I think when people see it, they're like, I think it's clear what the intention is as to why we're showing it, and how we're showing it, and it exists in every family. I mean, there's actually this really great show that follows a Jewish family called Schnitzel, and they have an uncle who Schnitzel, I'm sorry, and they have an uncle.
I love that show.
Oh, it's so good. And they have the uncle who hates Muslims. Yeah. You know, so it's like it's so funny because it's like you see, oh yeah, that's another thing that I've heard from you know, my Jewish friends who watch the show. They're like, dude, I have that uncle. He just says, it's like it becomes algebraic. You know, he just says insert whatever thing, and then you're trying to fight that off from that generation.
Well, the cross currents of kinds of racism, what is when you see in cultures. I'll be talking to someone who's from Mexico, and they'll be like, "Oh, look at that guys from Nicaragua, man, those people," and you're like, "What are we doing?"
Oh, you're not even. I know.
You know what I mean? And then the person in Nicaragua was like, "Just keep that Bolivian away from me. Those people, I don't know how you do it," and and you realize that this is happening in China. They've broken it down 75 different ways, and that province, well, can't marry into that family, and you realize that this is something in our genes.
It's everywhere, and I've always felt like it's a little bit unfairly attributed to being like only white people,
Right.
Because I think white people are just the best at racism. Like I think they institutionalized it in many ways, but it's just
right.
Racism.
We turned it into like McDonald's. We took people people are like a hamburger, and then white people said, no, there's a way to do this much more efficiently and on a massive scale.
And branded it.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not just, there's a lot of organic, homegrown racism in all of our communities that, just isn't branded in the same way. But it really, even something like Islamophobia, I've always felt like, there's this idea that people who aren't Muslim hate Muslims, but I've never seen anyone hate a Muslim more than another Muslim because they're not the type of Muslim that they think they should be. Like there's like Islamophobia, then there's like Muslim Islamophobia, where it's literally like just put Indians and Pakistanis in a room and it's just like, man, can we find what we have in common? Why are we so against each other?
Right.
And I think that's a lot of what we have in the show too, is just some of those elements of, again, like looking at something that is a human virus. And I don't want to be in the position where, okay, I'm making this show and I need to show everyone Arabs and Muslims are really lovable and, don't hate us, because then it just feels so sanitary and it feels so unreal and you just kind of don't believe it. So we have a character like my uncle who exists for that reason, just to say we're putting it all out on the table.
I mean, when you first introduced him, you think, well, he's just a joke. Yeah. Then you have these great scenes where you see that he has some levels to him, which are really cool. So, and it's crazy to say that because we're talking about, a character who should just be immediately canceled. But, that's, I think the thing is you're getting really near these third rails and kind of touching them a little bit, which I think is important to do.
Yeah, it feels like the most, I feel like that's a good way to put it. That third rail or that button you're not supposed to touch, all those things to me feel like the best thing that we could contribute as comedians, like to do that as thoughtfully as possible and to do it in a way where hopefully we're not just like spreading the issue or I would say adding to the problem. But yeah, that feels like the most useful thing I could do, because I don't think any of us are that well read or fit to like lead the country in any sort of direction. But I do think if we can kind of get into emotional complexities and play with them a bit, that starts to feel really fun. And we're also just trying to be funny. So I think that
that's the important thing, I think, is it's got to be comedy first.
Yes.